I am Kelsey Lewis Holden,
And I am Samantha Black.
and we're both quality managers at Sports Medicine Research and Testing Laboratory. Today we are going to be talking about how we implemented a new quality management system for multiple accrediting bodies for our laboratory. So here is our presentation outline. We're first going to discuss what the differences are between the two companies that we have within our lab, Smurtle versus SCTL. Then we're going to talk about how we converted our eQMS system from paper to electronic. We'll also be discussing the strategies that we use for building out our QualTrack system. And then Samantha is going to review some of the key workflow designs and how to pull reports on those key workflow designs. So Smurtle, as I mentioned before, is Sports Medicine Research and Testing Laboratory. We have two accreditations for our lab. It's through WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and through A2LA, and we're ISO 17025-2017 accredited. At our lab, we analyze for the presence of performance-enhancing drugs and substance abuse for Olympic athletes, professional athletes, collegiate sports, and also government agencies. We became established in 2003, and we came about from the 2002 Winter Olympics that were held in Salt Lake City. Just as of last year, we also became CLIA accredited, and we created the company SDTL, which is Sports Drug Testing Laboratory, and we created this to analyze for the presence of COVID by PCR. And I just want to note that all of the employees at Smurtle both work for SDTL and Smurtle. So from converting our paper to electronic system, we first, before we converted to QualTracks, had a paper system where we traditionally would print out our SOPs, and they were wet signed by employees. And once they were signed, they were then scanned, and then a paper copy was printed, and also electronic copies were available for employees to read. All of our staff recorded their SOP readings and training records within a personal training binder that they kept for themselves. Forms were also created electronically, and they were saved on an internal drive where they could be printed for use. This created a lot of problems especially for the quality managers to try to audit people's training records. There was often challenges on finding where they had signed off on these or who had completed their training records. It was also hard to control what forms had been implemented and what versions were out there when they were just saved on the internal drive. So for planning our QualTrack system, we had kind of some four major areas that we focused on. So they were permissions, organized groups, and departments. So we're going to go through each one of these and discuss them a little bit further. So for permissions, we had to just first set up how we wanted to build out our QMS system based on permissions. So for admin permissions, those were given to just Samantha and I because we were the main ones that were responsible for building out the QMS system, and we were both the quality managers for both of these accreditations. So we also built out a permissions for quality support staff. These were people that were helping us build out and develop some of these quality systems. We also assigned out management permissions, which are shown in this image on the right here. And we gave them permissions for document control, trainings and tests. They're able to pull reports on their employees that are underneath them. And then we also have staff permissions, and these are just basic permissions that are given out to employees. And we also can assign out permissions to these individuals on an as-needed basis if they need to edit documents or do any other type permissions. Folder level permissions we've also assigned out based on the folders. We give people permissions and access to different folders based on what their permission levels are. So organize, we also had to first decide how we want to organize our documents. So on the right is an example of how our Smurtle documents are organized, and we also for our CLIA accreditation, we have our documents organized a little bit differently just because there's different requirements and other priorities for that accreditation. So we have listed them out just based on what accrediting body they're for. And these also, like I mentioned before, tie into our group assignments. So access is restricted based on your permissions and based on who needs access to those folders. our groups, we also had to plan out our groups, which was very important for building out our system. So we had to keep in mind what groups would be useful based on what trainings and different things that we needed to assign out. So we had to plan these out. One example of group assignments that we used is on the right here, was for job descriptions, and we based our trainings off of these. So when a user gets assigned to a job description group, then the job description training will automatically be sent out to them. So we tried to base a lot of our trainings on these group assignments so that it could automate our system and make it easier for us. We also wanted to utilize our all users group, and we wanted to refrain from assigning that to a lot of tests or trainings so that we could use it to have an auditor login. So that way the auditor would not have access to our entire system, but we could give them access to the SOPs and important documents that were useful for doing a remote assessment. And the last one was departments. We discussed what departments we wanted to incorporate into our Qualtrack system. We could do HR, quality, IT. Our lab personally decided to incorporate our entire quality system into here. And we also took portions of IT and HR, and we're still continuing to expand those out. So for HR, we have PTO requests that we have a workflow through that is useful for all of our employees. We also have the employee handbook and benefit information that is inside Qualtracks as well. And for IT, we've also incorporated some of their critical forms and a process change workflow for implementing changes to their system. So for implementation, we focused, like I mentioned, on building out our group assignments. That was one of the most important things to get set up first thing. We also had to decide if we wanted to make everyone re-sign off on their SOPs that they had already read, or if we should try to accommodate their previous SOP reading assignments that were recorded on those paper systems. So we decided what would be easiest for us would be to make everyone re-sign off on their SOPs. That way we had everyone's training records and SOP sign-offs were all in one centralized location, and it also made it easy for the remote audits to be able to electronically show the auditor who was signed off on SOP readings and what trainings they had signed off on as well. So for our SOP readings, they're based on group assignments, and we also have a test associated with our SOPs. So this image here shows how we have our SOPs set up as a reading acknowledgement. It just says, did you read and understand the quality manual, yes or no? If the employee selects yes, then that will count as their sign off for reading that SOP. And we also have each SOP set up so that the SOP will automatically be reassigned out to each individual when a revision has been made to that SOP. Some of our more critical SOPs and standards do have reading comprehension tests associated with them, just to make sure that everyone understood the document that they were reading. So just one little disclaimer we had is that if you think something will go wrong while building out this system, it probably will go wrong. So we had to create and allow a lot of time for both Sam and I as the quality managers to kind of clean up the system and kind of plan what mistakes might happen. So we had to allot time for us to be able to correct errors such as people initiating workflows for other individuals, or they initiate a training instance for themselves multiple times, and these sometimes have to be cleaned up by us, and they sometimes create them not knowing that they made that mistake. So there has to be a lot of oversight as to cleaning some of these instances up. We also found that when we first were implementing Qualtracks that some trainings and a lot of in-person one-on-one trainings with people was useful in showing them how to go through the workflows and walking them through the different processes. And we also found that we can create about 8-minute videos that you can upload to Qualtracks as kind of some basic walkthroughs and showing some screen shares of how to go through some workflows and other processes.
Okay, I will be covering, and I'm the quality manager over the COVID section. And I don't know if we described it earlier, I don't know if it was clear, but we decided to split our quality management systems completely into two. Kelsey oversees all of the Smyrtle quality management system, and I oversee the quality management system over SDTL, which is the COVID section. So that is how structurally we're built, and we've built our quality management system, and Qualtrack's very similar. There is a little bit of overlap, and one of the overlapping workflows I'm going to show you here is one of our key workflow designs that's used between both quality management systems in Qualtrics. When designing a quality key workflow design, you want to design it so that it communicates to all of your departments within your organization. You want it to talk to your Qualtrics admin, you want it to talk to management, and you want it to effectively communicate back in some kind of way to your LIMS or your ERP or your CRM. Depending on what your organization's using for an information database. I want to note that we will be going into more advanced Qualtrics development discussions. We will be focusing on a laboratory setting as well. That's what I'm going to be presenting. These particular key workflow designs can be set up to allow management to approve or deny requests. It also, for your Qualtrics admin, it communicates back to group assignments, letting Qualtrics admin know when employees are training throughout the lab, when they need to be moved around in their Qualtrics system so that it can automatically send out trainings and tests and SOPs associated with that section. It also can allow for a little bit of feedback to whoever controls permissions on your LIMS or ERP or CRM database as well. And to kind of sum it up, key workflows can be incorporated in any accreditation scheme. So I'll be presenting our laboratory procedure training record workflow that we designed internally. This workflow is designed for our laboratory employees. Once they start training on a procedure in the lab, they have to have a training record where they've been trained on 4 batches by other individuals that are trained, and then effectively signed off by a supervisor saying they are allowed to perform the procedure independently in the lab. So that's what this is set up for. It's specific to our organization and how we've done it, but we wanted to display this one because of how much feedback we get from it and how much it communicates throughout our lab. So let's see here. So when an employee launches one of these training workflows, it effectively will communicate back to Qualtrics admin to alert them that this employee is now responsible for new SOPs, new trainings. And then once they've been placed into the proper group associated with that training that they launched, they will be automatically assigned out those SOPs and any trainings in that group. The other benefit to doing a workflow like this is it's fully audit trail capable. In the dark orange boxes, you'll see there are sign off. That is where each trainer is signing off saying, yes, I signed this, I observed this individual, or I trained this individual on that particular batch. And at the very end, you'll see a blue box. That is the supervisor reviewing the entire record saying, yes, I have confidence that this person is competent and that they can perform this procedure independently, and closes out the training record saying it's complete. So when you present that in an audit, that presents very well, the completed workflow. The other piece of it is that LIMS permission, or LIMS ERP or CRM, if you have permission level sets for your database systems, then this is an opportunity to create routes where whoever controls those permissions can grant permissions based off a training record. And that's what we've done here. We've added a step in to limit permissions in our database management system based on their training record to ensure that one is at least launched. It is the job of the quality managers to make sure that trainings are completed, because we have seen them get launched and then ignored. So we do from time to time go and pull reports, which are extremely easy, and that's in the following slides where we'll show what those reports look like. So the other challenge that we had was approaching a paper record and trying to convert it into our electronic record workflow. What we decided to do to have a completely electronic record for each employee, which could be presented in a remote audit, was to build designated routes for Qualtrics admin, or i.e. me and Kelsey. You'll see it there in the image. We highlighted it yellow. We called it for pre-Qualtrics training records or / method development records only. We recommend when you build routes like these that are designated for just entering a paper record, that you restrict those, let's see here, restrict the permissions based on responsible parties inside that step. So once you click the button for pre-Qualtrics training records, it will automatically go to a step. That step is only controlled by Kelsey and I. So if somebody accidentally presses that button, like a basic user, an employee presses that button, we'll be alerted immediately. And we also built out an email alert to let us know if that happened. So keep that in mind when you're building these kind of routes, and all employees have access to them, that you will see those kind of errors. Just build yourself an email so that you can see when it happens. The other thing we did was later on, we built in a custom field that we could expire a training based off employee reviews. So that particular field is only viewable at the close step, so that we could go in and turn our edit workflow permissions on, and then create like a little drop down training expired. That can also be done. That level of customization exists in Qualtrics. So in the next slide, we'll be talking about what the reports look like when you're either auditing the system or checking for errors, or checking on an employee to see if they have any incomplete trainings, to check back with them to get help them get those complete. This particular image that we've shown is the output on our training records for employees. So you'll see the training status custom field that we added, that we've utilized in the second column, where you see a training expired. That is something where Kelsey and I have gone in and expired the training at a later date, once we realize this employee no longer conducts that procedure. The other thing that you'll see highlighted is the very last column. That is our pre-Qualtrics training record. Kelsey and I went in and hand entered the entire pre-Qualtrics training record from this employee for that particular procedure. Now, we understand we're a smaller company. We only have about 50 employees. Some of you watching are probably in the realm of over 100 or 500 employees, or even more. That hand entering everybody's record is not an option for you guys. You may benefit more from just a simple drop down where you say, yes, the employee was signed off prior, and that's it. And then you push it through and close it out. That level of customization exists in Qualtrics too. You don't have to do what we did. There's other ways around it. There's more simple ways around it as well. We wanted this level of audit capability, but because we're a small company, we were able to do that. Okay, and then the next slide, we're going to talk about how you can continually improve your quality management system once you build out your bare bones. Workflows offer a vast array of customization depending on accreditation needs. We are continuing to build out our Qualtrics with workflows, and I don't really see an end in sight. Every single time we come through approached with a challenge or a difficult situation, it seems like a workflow is a good solution. And with that, keeping in mind workflows, if you're not familiar with building them, they can seem very challenging, but understand that you can use the Qualtrics Workflow Designer, and that's what's shown in the image here is an example of using the designer and creating a workflow from the designer. That is a very helpful tool and recommend using that for your organization as well. The one thing that we would say, Kelsey and I would probably recommend, is try to avoid creating multiple routes for users. This is typically where things go wrong when you have multiple routes for most users on workflows. So try not to do it. If you're able to just push it through for a management review, and then a manager or a Qualtrics admin or your quality team can push it depending if you have multiple routes. I would recommend, we would recommend actually that you create a step where an individual from quality or management selects the correct route. So with that, we will summarize our entire, we will summarize the entire presentation that we did.
Yeah, so first we just talked about how we were able to incorporate multiple accrediting bodies into our single QMS system. We also talked about how we converted our paper system to an electronic system. And we also talked about our planning out our Qualtrics system before implementing, and also our POGD, which was permissions, organized groups, and departments.
And then lastly, thinking about if you can create a key workflow to help feedback into all your departments. With that, thank you.
That's it.
And
thank you.
Hopefully it was helpful. Yeah.